at the moment. Let's carry on then with this discussion on sanctions that Russia is currently facing following its invasion of Ukraine. We're now joined via Zoom by Associate Professor for School of Economics at the University of Johannesburg, Professor Peter Baur. A very good afternoon to you, Prof. Thanks very much for joining us here on SABC News, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're most welcome. What do you make of these sanctions that are imposed on Russia? And just on a side note, it does seem as though Putin is not particularly concerned. I mean, for example, just to give an example on my side, what I've noticed is that China has kind of supported Russia, and it does seem as though China would be, in a way, Putin's economic lifeline, as Russia is facing this, what would be isolation. Would it really affect him?
Most definitely. The degree of trade that is actually happening between Russia and the rest of the world is extremely important for their industry. Without that industry mechanism, they are going to be find themselves in a very difficult position, but not only in the short run, but also in the long run too. Reestablishing trade contacts after such an event is also extremely difficult to want to build up. So currently, as it stands, sanctions are an extremely powerful weapon against the industry. And against the country overall.
You know, it does seem as though there is quite a bit of support for Ukraine at this time, but on the side of that, we're hearing the Ukrainian president claiming that the country is alone and is not getting sufficient support. I mean, for example, U.S. President Joe Biden has deployed more U.S. troops to Germany. We've heard the condemnation of the violence from Germany. In fact, Germany has taken it a step further. They've the Nord Stream 2 certification, they've shut that down, which certainly is a major problem for Russia. And they've indeed offered refugee status for people coming from Ukraine and said they'll help Poland. Is it fair for the Ukrainian president to say, I feel isolated, I feel that all these world powers who said they would support me aren't necessarily supporting me? In his words, he said that the assistance is insufficient.
Absolutely. I think he has every right to say that right now. I think the Ukraine is really right now that front line. I do believe that additional support should be put into place right now, because the consequences of this, both for the Ukrainian country in the long term, especially economically, and as well what would happen to the rest of Europe, should Russia invade the Ukraine, could have dire consequences. And this is, of course, going to be on both social and economic levels. What we're seeing on a social level is an incredible disruption of all services. We're seeing people not getting access to the kind of services or security that they need. We're seeing absolute mass violations taking place already, and these are really concerns for us that we should that maybe this front line needs to be held, especially in terms of actually being able to protect the future of not just the Ukraine, but obviously the entire European region. And the main reason for that is we're not sure exactly what Putin's further ambitions are actually going to be.
And it's interesting that you use the term dire consequences, but you're also saying that the Ukrainian president is right, that he should be getting additional support. When you're talking about additional support, in what way? I mean, if any country goes and, let's just say, decides to drop a bomb in Russia, there will be dire consequences. And I mean, we've heard Putin himself saying that anybody who even tries to get involved in this conflict outside of Russia and Ukraine will experience those dire consequences. So when you're talking about this additional support, in what way should other countries get involved and give that additional support you speak of?
Yeah, the way I see it is the way in which this could potentially escalate. What I'm really scared of is if it spills over into the other countries, what then? And then we can bring back the whole China question, because I believe that China right now is playing a very sort of diplomatic role in trying to stabilize the trade. China needs the trade with Russia as much as Russia needs to trade with the rest of the world. I feel that the overarching consequences, if there is a spillover, will have far bigger consequences, and that's definitely where the dire comes in. We should really be concerned how this is managed, and it takes, even though as we could see that Putin is offering to now negotiate, this is now about sovereignty. We're now questioning the identity of the Ukrainian people. We're questioning the identity of the state nation. And those borders play a very significant role, not only in terms of the basic situation where they're situated, but we're talking about democracy, the border-based democracy of people, rights of people right now, and rights of people are being clearly violated on every possible level.
Now, of course, we know that Russia is a member of BRICS. Not much talk from even South Africa with regards to the fact that we are part of this economic bloc. But let's talk about how these possible sanctions would or might affect other members in this trade and economy in the long term. I mean, we've heard, of course, South Africa condemning the violence. We've certainly heard other countries having a lot to say, but in terms of them being part of BRICS, will that be put aside? I mean, there's not much being spoken about when it comes to that.
Well, there's a huge amount of investment just between South Africa and Russia, for example. I think we're talking about figures in excess of about 5 billion rand are invested into Russia. Russia has investments into South Africa, and they're a reasonably important trade partner. A large amount of fresh produce, such as fruit and nuts and things, get exported across to Russia. We're also seeing that a large amount of semi-produced goods and of course raw materials get exported to Russia too, which will then have an impact on us. So any form of sanctions is actually going to harm the countries that are actually doing the sanctioning too. So the related industries, be it in South Africa or be it in China or India, are actually also going to be affected by this. Trade is very important in terms of economic growth and continuing development, and many of these countries, including India here and Brazil, we're experiencing large levels of unemployment. We're experiencing economic distress. These kind of sanctions will actually have a two-way impact. It will not only harm the countries that are sanctioning Russia, but it's going to be harming the countries that are obviously going to be harming Russia then too. So the whole challenge, especially with BRICS, is the relationships that we have established between, if I would like to call it, our sister countries in this BRICS relationship, could also be harmed, especially through the trade flows and the redistribution of trade. We're also going to see other factors that we should worry about, especially in the moment we export large amount of primary goods. Commodity prices are going to start increasing, obviously quite seriously. This will have implications for us, for example, in terms of the cost of energy. This is all going to be inflationary. We've seen inflationary pressure in the European Union. That is obviously going to affect our inflationary pressure, because we import a lot of the inflation from these countries. And of course, it's going to impact our relationship overall, how we respond. Well, the way in which we respond to this is also going to be affecting our relationship. So this is going to be a delicate balance. We're trying to apply, I think, as much diplomacy as possible to the situation, but we've got to recognize that Ukraine is in a very, very deep state of emergency, and we must recognize that borders are sovereign, and we need to protect and uphold the rights of people, individuals, and democracies.
Prof, we appreciate your input very much. Thank you for giving us your time here on SABC News, sir.
Thank you.